Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about some books again because I read some books again in the month of March and I haven't updated you on those yet, so I thought we could do that today. You will have seen in the thumbnail that I was only holding up 2 books, but that's because those are the only books I have physical copies for. I've actually read 4 books in total, which is sort of like my standard number in a given month. I do feel that I didn't read as much as that would have been possible for me, because I do feel that, especially because I got caught up in this like massive book, that I didn't always feel like picking it up again. So I think I could have finished like 1 or 2 more books if I hadn't been stuck trying to read this massive fantasy story. So let me first talk you through the 2 physical copies that I read, and then I'll talk to you about the 2 audiobooks that I finished. The first physical copy that I finished was A Natural History of Dragons by Brennan, and this is a fantasy series with a historical element. It's set in sort of like a Victorian kind of world, but in this world, dragons are a real thing, and you're following a lady who's living in this time period who's trying to become a natural scientist with a specialization in dragons. She already had interest in dragons as a little girl, and she sort of tells you her story of the first time describing finding dragons and really interacting with them. And it's a very interesting one. It's fantasy, but it's not like action-packed fantasy. It's not like, here come the dragons, let's go slay them. It's not that kind of thing. It's much more like a diary style, so she writes her memoirs, and that's what you're reading. And so there's also like the scientific element to it, and I really enjoyed reading this. It sort of fuses everything I like about fantasy and historical fiction all into one read, and I really enjoyed it. It's definitely a series that I feel I would like to read the next book in the series of. I think there are 4 or 5 of them, and these covers are just stunning. I'll show you up close. So you've got your dragon there, and then you have sort of like a description, like what the different parts of a dragon are called. It's really cool. So I will definitely be picking up the second book in this series at some point. But for now, I have enough to read, so I don't need to get that one anytime soon. Now, the book that I got a little bit stuck on, I didn't hit a reading slump so much. I was just super busy at work, and when I get super busy and stressed out, reading is just not my top priority, because I do have to be in sort of like the right mind space to read. When I'm very busy, I just like to veg out on the couch and watch YouTube videos or Netflix. Like, that's my default. Like, I just don't want to think about anything kind of thing. And so going into a massive fantasy story was not really top of my list. However, I did manage to finish Kingdom of Ash within the month of March. I took it with me on vacation. If you saw my London vlog, then you will have seen this book as well. I read a good 160 pages while I was away, and then I think I read like another 300 or 400 pages that weekend after I came back, and then it was just like sitting there for like 2.5 weeks straight, and I was like, okay, I'm going to commit. I'm going to read the last 400 pages, because this book is like 970 pages long. It's a behemoth of a book, which in a way I don't mind it, because I like the characters in the story and I like the world. It's just that it was just trying to do everything, which is why it becomes a little bit long-winded. We get every single perspective, and I thought it was a little bit too nicely wrapped up with a bow around everything in the end. I didn't think that was a very strong part about this book, but I did like it. It nicely wraps up the series. I do have to say that the previous books in the series, especially numbers 3 and 4, is it Queen of Shadows and Crown of Midnight? Those 2 are my favorites in the series, because that's when we're getting in the middle of things. There's still a lot of mystery going on. And in this book, the stakes seem to be really high when you go into it. Like, the last book before this really ends on a cliffhanger, so you're very expectant. And I feel it doesn't really live up to that sort of expectation that it sets itself. So that's why this book was very enjoyable. I still enjoyed myself while reading this. It was a good one, but it's not my favorite book in the series by any means. So I think I gave this like 3.75 stars, which I think is actually one of my lowest ratings for any book in this series. So it wasn't definitely not my favorite. Other two books that I read on audiobook. I got myself a subscription on an app called Storytel. That's the main app here in the Netherlands, it seems. But they also have quite a good selection of English language books, so that's what I tend to listen to. So the first book that I listened to just to give it a try, I think it was Gail Foreman, I think the name of the author is. The name of the book is Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine. And it's like a adult contemporary kind of book about this lady, Eleanor Oliphant, and she's always just fine, but at the same time, you kind of learn very quickly that something's up. And you don't really know what. Is she autistic? Does she have mental health problems? Like, what's going on with this lady? And it's not until she meets a guy from IT who, I don't know, she happens to be walking down the street with him for some reason, and then they see an older man having a stroke, and they end up helping him. And that kind of pushes her out of her comfort zone, because Eleanor has a sort of like routine of what her weeks and her days look like, and that becomes completely disrupted. And she needs that disruption to sort of come to terms with things that have happened in her past, and as the story progresses, she learns more about what's going on. And it's not the kind of book that I would easily pick up myself if it were like a physical copy, because it's the kind of book where I know I would get annoyed with the character, and where I know I was like, I'm not sure why, but I'm always very, with like these contemporary stories where people have problems, I always find them a bit easy, predictable. But as an audiobook, since I like listening to audiobooks while I'm doing other things, either because I'm doing chores or I'm getting ready in the morning, it's nice to have a story that doesn't absorb all of my attention. And so that book was definitely perfect to be reading. And in the end, I thought it was pretty okay. It's not the best book I've ever listened to or the best book I've ever read by any means, but as an audiobook, it worked. It kept me entertained. I wanted to know what would happen next, and that to me means it's good enough to give it at least, I don't know, was it like 4 stars, I think? I'm not sure anymore how many stars I gave it, because it was the first book I finished in the month, so it's been a while since I had a look at that. Then the other book that I finished on audiobook was Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is again one of those books that I knew that if I were to buy the physical copy, I wouldn't read it. I don't really enjoy biographies, I have to say. But this book was read by Michelle Obama herself, so that sort of almost puts you in the room together with her. I know that sounds weird, but it sort of feels like that, right? That she's talking to you, and since it's her life story, it really fit everything. Like in like emotional moments, you could also hear a little bob in her voice where she was like it still touches her, you know? So that was really good, and yeah, it's just her life story, and Michelle Obama is just a really, really cool lady, I think. So I was very curious about her biography. It's just something that I know I wouldn't have read as a paper copy, because I don't really enjoy reading biographies all that much. But again, a good one for audio. And I do have to say I was pretty impressed with how it was written. So I gave that a pretty high score as well. And those were the 4 books that I read in the month of March. Not that much, really, to say about them. It's especially because this is the last book in the series, I don't want to spoil you too much, because if I say anything that's going on in this book, you really need to have read everything else that's going on in that series. So yeah, bit of a cliffhanger perhaps there, but yeah, those were all of the books that I read. I really would like to know what you've read, and if you have any recommendations for me. So if you'd like to leave a comment down below with what you've read and what your recommendations are, I would love to hear from you. And if you like this video, then I would appreciate it if you could thumbs it up, or subscribe to my channel, of course, if you want to stay up to date for when I post new videos, which is on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So 3 times a week I make new videos, so stay tuned. And without further ado, I would like to thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!
I put